We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. First, I'd like to establish quorum with a roll call. So, board members, I'm going to go through the list in alphabetical order. If you could please confirm your presence, that would be great. I will go ahead and start with Andrew Drabkin.
Present.
Thank you. Calumet Pham.
Calumet Pham, public member, present.
Thank you. Derek Matos.
Derek Matos, present.
Thank you. Jackie Crabtree.
Jackie Crabtree, industry member, present.
Thank you. Dr. Carrie Williams.
Dr. Carrie Williams, industry member, present.
Thank you. And Steve Weeks.
Steve Weeks, public member, present.
Thank you. And that confirms that we do have quorum. So I'll go ahead and get started with the next agenda item, which are opening remarks. First, I just want to remind everyone that the board's purview is consumer protection. It is through the lens of consumer protection that we review and make decisions on everything from regulations to licensing and enforcement. Second, I want to explain that by law, board members are not allowed to respond to public comments. I want to reiterate that we are listening to all of our public comments and hearing your concerns, but by law, we are only allowed to respond to or speak to items listed on the agenda. This is why you will not receive an answer to questions asked during the public comment period. Next, I want to acknowledge the pain that this industry and all licensees are experiencing during this time. The past few months of pandemic have created unprecedented hardship for everyone. This board is comprised of both public members and industry members. I know that my fellow industry members have been equally impacted by the shutdowns as all licensees have, and I'm sure it has been painful for all of them and all of us to listen to the stories shared during public comments, from communications that are being sent to the board and from the news, because these are stories that also apply to them. I know that many of you have been frustrated at the perceived silence of the board. We have shared at past meetings what Christy Underwood, our executive officer, and board staff have been doing, trying their best to support the governor's office and California Department of Public Health to make informed decisions. And I know for many of you that was and remains not enough. I want to first acknowledge that Christy and the board staff have worked every day to provide information and perspective to the governor's office and California Department of Public Health on the decisions impacting this industry and its licensees. I thank them for their hard work and tireless efforts these past months. I know that their hearts were and are with our licensees, as many of you expressed heartbreaking stories of uncertainty and economic hardship. We relayed these sentiments and stories to the decision makers and offered what was within our ability to assist California Department of Public Health and the governor's office as they worked to navigate COVID. It was devastating to us all when the governor announced that salons would have to close but would be allowed to operate outdoors, and board staff scrambled to execute on orders that we learned about at the same time as the general public. These months as a state entity, we have worked to support and execute on orders that were handed to us. We were not at the table to make these decisions. Our input was only requested after decisions were made. We were asked to work on guidelines to implement, but were not asked for an opinion or a POV on how licensees can work safely indoors. We were not asked for partnership to create conditions under which licensees could continue to operate and provide services. We were not asked to build a solution together. I want to share a little about a meeting I took part in on August 26th. A meeting that I believe only took place because we stepped out of our lane and voiced concern to some legislative offices about the lack of say we had on decisions impacting our licensees. From the moment we voiced concern, it took 3 weeks to get a meeting in place with Department of Public Health and the Governor's Office. On that call were representatives from Department of Consumer Affairs, Department of Public Health, the Governor's Office, and myself and Christy Underwood, our board's executive officer. I asked for 3 things on that call. 1, a true partnership with California Department of Public Health and the Governor's Office so that Barbara Cosmo would be at the table for decisions prior to finalization and announcements at press conferences so that the board could help weigh in and provide insight into our regulations that could help with their decisions. 2, a clear reason or statement to provide licensees with as to why they were not being allowed to open indoors. And 3, California Department of Public Health's partnership and presence with outreach via teleconferences or other communications platforms so that licensees could hear directly from them, and greater in-language outreach efforts due to the diversity of our licensee population. In short, the meeting was disappointing, to say the least. I asked that my personal contact information be provided to the representatives from California Department of Public Health and the Governor's Office. I haven't received any communication from them since that meeting. Regarding my request to work in partnership, nothing has changed. 2 days after our meeting, the Governor announced his new blueprint for a safer economy. None of the changes were shared during our meeting just 2 days prior. We were informed minutes prior to the announcement regarding the changes allowing hair salons and barbershops to operate indoors. Again, our board staff scrambled to gather information and work towards providing answers to questions we couldn't anticipate. Again, we had been left in the dark. Regarding my question about a clear answer as to why our licensees could not operate indoors at that time, I received the response that this industry is non-essential. I asked what proof they had that this industry had high risk of exposure for the general public. California Department of Public Health mentioned 1 case in the Midwest in which 2 licensees caught COVID. I asked if there had been any cases of COVID which had been linked to an establishment through contact tracing in California. I did not receive any data point that day or since to indicate that there had been any cases. I asked a lot of questions and I didn't get the answers that I felt the licensees of this industry deserve. The one answer we did get from that phone call was that California Department of Public Health would agree to participate in outreach events if coordinated by us. I share these brief points with you all because I have to apologize that the conversation did not result in the answers that the licensees and this industry deserves and needs. California Department of Public Health and the Governor's Office continues to separate out hair salons and barbershops, even though all of our establishments follow the same regulations. They continue to leave manicurists and aesthetics in a different category without concrete answers as to why. To me, this shows how little effort they have made to understand this industry and how it works. I asked in that meeting if we could work together in partnership toward proactive solutions and to understand the conditions under which our licensees can work indoors safely. That request and offer still stands. We need more than ever to develop state-level guidance and plans for this industry to operate safely. The pandemic continues, and I'm sure we all fear and anticipate a step backwards in the upcoming months, which will once again send businesses back to square one. I asked that California Department of Public Health and the Governor's Office work with Barbara Cosmo so we can get ahead of potential shutdowns so that our licensees do not have to go through this again. But that offer made 2 weeks ago now remains unanswered. What are the conditions and restrictions under which licensees can operate safely to keep themselves and the general public safe? I think our licensees know how to operate safely, know how to keep themselves and their clients safe. I'm asking that California Department of Public Health and the governor's office give us the opportunity to explain why and how to them and to work with them to create those guidelines. We want to keep California safe. It's why the board exists. Today, we have placed the topic of COVID-19 impact on the agenda for board discussion. I look forward to hearing the perspectives and thoughts of my colleagues on the board on this matter, and I look to you all for a robust exchange of ideas. And with that, I would like to move to the next agenda item, board member remarks. To my fellow board members, if you would like to share any remarks at this time, please use the raise hand feature so that I can identify you. I see Jackie Crabtree's hand is up.
That was so well said. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Jackie. I see Derek Matos' hand up.
Good morning, Lisa, and fellow board members. Lisa, I'd like to thank you for what you just delivered. I think everything you said is spot on and is exactly, it echoes what I prepared to address today. I thank you for your work. I thank you for raising the questions and for being a voice, not only for the board, but for the entire industry. I know that Ms. Underwood, as well as the staff, BBC, have worked diligently throughout this time. I know they've been in the office. I know they've been scrambling. There's been a lot of confusion throughout this time. So again, I'd like to echo that I thank you for raising those questions. Discussions that were made in the past, wondering how come we weren't involved, why were we left out, still to be unanswered. I think that if this board, if it's our duty to regulate this industry, to protect the consumers at all costs, in order for us to do our job effectively, we need to be in full communication. Communication with each other, communication with the powers that be, communication with the lawmakers, communication with the Department of Health. I agree with your sentiments and your plan. I look forward to being part of the discussion in the future. We should be happy that we are back. However, there are some things with these new guidelines that I believe have not been communicated fully. The capacity limits that have been set, for instance, in Los Angeles County and Contra Costa County and many other counties throughout the state. I believe that we were just so hungry and desired to get back to work that we may have overlooked what those capacities are. And without explanation in full detail, I'm fearful that our licensees may go back to their shops as normal, their salons as normal, and potentially create another issue. Although we have the training and the ability to keep a safe environment, especially one is that controlled the way we know how to control our environment, it is important for us to communicate what these capacity limits actually mean. For instance, a short example, if an establishment is inside of a mall or in certain counties where it doesn't matter whether you're in a mall or higher public space, what does 25% actually mean? Do we know? Do we have enough to be able to explain this? I've done a small bit of research, and here is an example just for the record, and hopefully we can communicate this to our licensees and to the public so that we can be safe. Whenever you occupy a space, you receive a certificate of occupancy. The certificate of occupancy has capacity or occupancy ratios. An example of that is if you have a space that is 1,200 square feet, then the capacity limit for that space is 3 people. that is 25% capacity. I was blind to that fact initially and thinking, a bit ignorant as a matter of fact. I thought that 25% meant if my space holds 100 people, that I can have 25 people in there. I thought I was right within the spec to be able to allow our staff to get back to work, to be able to provide for their families and to make up some of that lost time, pay back on bills and some debt that had been incurred. I was surprised to find out that that was not the ratio at all, and rather, those certificates of occupancy and capacity ratios defined exactly what that meant. At 3 people being able to occupy a 1,200 square foot space, you could only imagine. And some salon owners, barbershop owners, they may have staffs of 4, 6, 10, maybe even 12 or more. So what happens to the rest of that staff? What are they able to do? I want to use this example just because I believe that there's more that we can do. I agree with the sentiment as you discussed. I believe that communication is key, and I look forward to coming up with good ideas with this board on how we can communicate in the future by using access, partnerships, using the media that we have at hand to rather just, instead of slightly posting the information that we receive, but also come up with solutions that will further help our industry going forward. This has been a detrimental time to many people. Myself, I've had to close a location. Heartbreaking enough as that may have been, I'd like the public to understand that many of us are in the same situation as they are. Many of us face the same resolve, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. We're enthusiastic and looking forward and trying to be as positive as possible. But I also know that unless we guide this industry, unless we do what we say we are here to do in protecting the public, that this can all be taken away from us once again. Lisa, I hope that your calls do get answered. I hope that the board does get a response. And I hope that the powers that be know that we are enthusiastic of the idea to work in a partnership, hand in hand, to make sure that the public is safe and to make sure that our licensees get back to work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Derek. I see that Dr. Carey, you have your hand raised.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you so much, Derek, for your words. I just want to offer my words of support in what both Lisa and Derek have expressed regarding our board. I want to thank our board staff. We have been working really hard and tirelessly since the shutdowns have begun. As an industry member, I too have been impacted by the shutdown, and I thank you, Derek, so much for going into so much detail and what you've expressed as far as the impact on all of the licensees, including those members of the board. I myself too work in a location where there are several salons. And so even knowing that the new regulations regarding capacity limits, we're still trying to understand again how that impacts all of us as licensees so that we can continue to operate safely. So again, I just want to extend my support in the comments that have been made so far. Lisa, I thank you so much for your leadership. And I too hope that your calls are returned. And I also hope that the public, again, getting more information about our role as the board and the work that we've been doing, that we have really, really been working hard to make sure that we can all get back to work and that we can all continue to serve the public safely.
Thank you, Dr. Carey. And I believe that board member Steve Weeks would like to make a comment. I believe our board member Steve Weeks is having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to just pause for a minute to give him a chance to reconnect. While we wait for Steve, I just want to reiterate to everyone my questions. I know that they were not new questions being asked. I know that Christy Underwood, our executive officer, has posed those questions as well. Steve, are you able to speak now? I believe that was Steve.
This is the moderator. I muted Steve just real quick. Steve, I'm going to unmute you again. See if you're able to speak.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just can't raise my hand.
No problem. Please go ahead with your comments.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to share with the board that during the last 2 weeks, I've visited at least a dozen barbershops, hair salons, and street-side nail establishments here in Los Angeles. I wanted to see for myself how our licensees are performing during these very difficult times, and I found while the frustration level is high, to say the least, so is the level of health and safety protocols. There was not one establishment that I visited that was not adhering to our regulations. Even though in the case of outside services, they had to go through extremely difficult operational procedures to set up and operate. I mean, I saw a barber shop in Burbank carrying out 5 300-pound barber chairs just to set up on the sidewalks to work out there. I can tell you that I personally would have used the services of any one of these establishments that I visited. Our licensees are clearly well-trained in health and safety requirements. And during these times, they're even, I think, over-diligent in their operations and their adherence to health and safety protocols. I was very proud of the way our industry was performing with these highly restrictive environment that we're working under right now.
This is the moderator. I quickly muted board member Weeks again.
I'm not sure, Steve, if Steve was done with his remarks.
Board member Weeks.
I am done with my remarks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you to all of the board members who provided remarks. I'm really looking forward to the deeper discussion we will be having about COVID-19's impact on the industry later on today. If there are no further comments or remarks from the board members, I would like to move forward with the agenda. Before I do so, I would like to reorder one of the items on the agenda due to the schedule limitations of some of our board members today. I will be moving agenda item number 8 up to follow item number 5 for items that will require a board vote. So after agenda item number 8, I will then move to what is currently agenda item number 6. So with that, I'd like to move on to the discussion and possible approval of our June 8th and August 3rd board meeting minutes. Board members, are there any questions regarding the minutes, or are we ready for a motion to approve? Jackie?
I move to approve the board minutes.
Thank you. I saw Andrew Dropkins hand up.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. At this time, I will go ahead and open for public comment on agenda item number 4. the board meeting minutes for June 8th and August 3rd. We'll now take public comment.
All
on
right,
this
this is the
specific item.
moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click on that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom center of your WebEx screen. We're currently sharing instructions on the screen for reference. In the Ask field, typically in the lower right-hand corner of the WebEx screen, please type, "I would like to make a public comment," and send to all panelists. And as a reminder, this Q&A feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once you are unmuted, you may verbally state your comment, and this is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board. Such inquiries submitted using this feature will not be answered. And I'll pause for just a short moment to allow members of the public to access that Q&A panel. This is a moderator once again. And just as a reminder, public comment for this period is only about the meeting minutes for this particular agenda item. All right, this is the moderator again. It looks like at this time, we do not have any requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, the Q&A panel is now closed.
Thank you. So we will now move to a board vote on the meeting minutes. I will go ahead and start in alphabetical order for a board vote. And I will start with Andrew Dropkin.
Andrew Dravkin, yes.
Thank you. Calame Pham.
Callie Mae Pham, yes.
Thank you. Derek Matos.
Derek Matos, yes.
Thank you. Jackie Crabtree.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Thank you. Dr. Carrie Williams.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Thank you. And Steve Weeks. Board Member Weeks.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Thank you. And Lisa Thong, yes. Okay, so next on the agenda item is Executive Officer's Report from Christy Underwood. Christy, please go ahead.
Good morning, members. I will start with my report. I have added something new to this item that I was hoping would help clarify some common questions that we've received over the last few months during this pandemic time. It's basically a Q&A of what the board's purpose is, since we have had a lot of questions with that aspect. So this is an item that is in your agenda under item number 5. What we'd like to do is, if any board members have any questions or comments on this document, we will then turn it into a better looking fact sheet with the help of Consumer Affairs and make that a document that we can share on our website. So basically it talks about the purpose of the board, which is for consumer protection. And it goes in to talk about who our board members are and where they, what the statutory authority is for appointing members. It talks about the executive officer and their role, how board meetings are held, which is based on the Bagley-Keene Opens Meetings Act, which is why what was referenced earlier, why board members can't comment on public comments. And then it talks about advocacy and a little bit of an explanation about why we've been asked so many times why we don't advocate for the industry. So it talks a little bit about our laws actually requires us to be consumer protection agency. So this is just something we're hopeful it'll help in the future If someone doesn't understand the role of the board, they can look up this information on our website and get some answers. So before I move on to the statistics, I want to just pause and see if any of the board members had any comments on this.
Jackie Crabtree?
I really like it, Christy. I think it's very helpful and informative, because I myself, before I got on the board and being a salon owner as well as a stylist, didn't understand everything that is governed by the board. So I really like it.
Yeah, I agree, Christy. Thank you for putting this together. I feel like this is something that we should have in our board meeting materials for every meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you. It will look a little nicer than this once the final document is approved.
Great.
Okay, so moving on to the statistics. We start with our quarterly applications received for our current fiscal year. You can see that they're down significantly, and that was obviously due to the fact that schools were closed, and many still are. So we're not getting the applications in. Mostly in May and June, we really saw a significant drop. And so we are starting to see some increases come up now. You'll see on page 3 of the statistics that we just wanted to add a comparison of last fiscal year to this fiscal year. And you can see that in April and May, we had significant decrease in the number of applications received, but you can see that in June, they're slowly starting to come back up. Moving on into our exam sites, our exam results. Exams is definitely one area where we are struggling right now. We are operating at half capacity, and that is, of course, because of COVID, for the safety of our candidates as well as our staff, because of COVID. But I did want to provide some additional info. We have on page 5 a breakdown of the apprentice program and the practical exam results, showing the difference between a school program and an apprentice program. Then if you turn the page to page 6, we look at the total breakdown that shows those numbers by language. So at the last board meeting, I verbally reported some breakout data that I'm now providing in writing. So on page 7, that's for our first quarter of our fiscal year. So that's just the exact information that I verbally said at the last meeting. But if you go to page 8, that's our current quarter. So granted, our quarter is a little small right now because of the pandemic, but I wanted to show what this is we took the data from our Spanish test takers and really broke it out to where they're coming from. So you can see that in the barber portion of this number, keep in mind this is a very small number, and that's why we included the whole first quarter and second quarter. But in the barber overall, we only had 16 candidates, so that's a very, very low number for a quarter. But 94% of those were from a Spanish-approved school. Spanish-approved meaning that they've been approved by the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary to teach in Spanish. And then if you look at the cosmetology numbers, which are a little higher for this quarter, you can see the breakdown there. 23% of those students came from a Spanish-approved school. 19% came from a non-Spanish approved school, which means that they weren't taught in Spanish at all, but that 19% chose to take the exam in Spanish. And then 12% are out of country, 46% are from closed schools. So in our industry, your hours never expire. And we have people that come in that took their test that was in school many, many years ago. I actually had somebody ask me over the weekend, they went to school 20 years ago and now they want to become licensed. So it's an interesting aspect there. The closed schools could have been closed by choice of the school, or they could have been closed because they might have gotten into some trouble. Either way, we have a lot of candidates coming from those closed schools that are no longer operating. And then we see the breakdown of the apprentice programs just by barbering and cosmetology. Now, there's no distinction on barbering and apprentice programs for Spanish or English because it's on-the-job training. And we don't know that. We could have individuals in the apprentice program that are working in salons that are completely only speaking Spanish in the salons. But we don't have that data. So we have to have apprentices as a whole. What I find is that we still have some work to do in the apprentice program. So with that, I'll be requesting on a later item that we come back to the board at our next board meeting, which is scheduled in December, with a review of our apprentice program and with recommendations from staff on items that we can do. It's something we've actually already been working on for quite some time, and I think it's we can bring this to the board at the next meeting and have a discussion on what we can do to start improving the apprentice program. Before I go on, I want to pause for any board member questions on anything I just mentioned.
It looks like Andrew Drapkin has a question.
Christy, for the on the review of the Spanish language written exam results, the closed schools, do we have any breakdown whether those are Spanish approved versus non-Spanish approved?
It is definitely something I could get.
Because, I'm finding it interesting that, looking at cosmetology, the pass rate was 31% overall for January through March, but it doubled basically to 61% from April to June. And I'm wondering why that is. I'm happy that it improved, but I don't know. Because the out of country is a lot lower too in that. And so I'm wondering if that might be one reason. But
we can certainly look at that. And again, the numbers were much higher of applicants in the first quarter than in the second quarter. And so hopefully
I know we realize we're dealing with a smaller sample size.
Right. But yes, we can certainly look at where those are coming from as well.
And also I'm concerned, like the barber, this last quarter, nobody passed in Spanish?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before I move on?
It looks like Derek Matos has his hand raised.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for this breakdown, Christy. I had one question. Do we know what the projections may have been for licensees had COVID not happened? It looks as though we were kind of on the rise. So I was just curious to see if we would surpass last year's number, and if so, by what rate. The other question that I had was in regard to the Spanish language exam. It looks as though zero passed, as Andrew just pointed out. It seems a bit of a low number as well, only 16. Was there a drop, or is this kind of average of what the Spanish-speaking, I guess in totality, the amount of people that are taking that written exam? That makes sense.
So I think the 16 is very rare. The barber industry seems to be growing, not shrinking. So I really think that the COVID, the impact to COVID is significant in that area. So I think it's, we wanted to provide this information for the quarter because we had data, but I don't know that this quarter is going to be real reliable. I get that only 16 failed, but I do think that that is a result of COVID, not the failure, but the low number. And then I don't know it as for projection of the whole year. This board stays fairly consistent. Our averages are, they fluctuate and they go down, sometimes in different months, but overall for the past several years, we're pretty consistent with our applications received and our licenses issued. So I think when we look at once we're done with this pandemic, which I'm sure we will be someday, I think that we'll definitely see the impact of COVID, but I think we'll even back out. It's always been interesting that we rarely have a slow time. We rarely have a time where we don't have people waiting to take the exam. So this is definitely a impact of the pandemic of what we're seeing in our workload right now.
Andrew, I see that your hand is back up.
Yeah, just mentioning COVID, it's not related to the Spanish language stuff, but it might be interesting just to keep a flag on this quarter, et cetera, and see. I know some schools were doing distance learning and see how effective that was and how that affects pass-fail rates versus in-person hands-on education.
Yes, we're tracking all of that and making sure we have asterisks on all areas of these months that we've been impacted. We're currently just submitted our annual report data, and that's, it's going to look different. This year's definitely going to stand out. So we're being very sure to make sure that is all noted. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on. We're at page 9 of the statistics, and that shows the licenses issued. And again, you can of course see that in April and June, that's where we had the largest impact. And so again, that'll be an asterisk. You can see down at the bottom for our licensed population remains fairly consistent. People have been renewing and keeping their licenses active. So we still, through the entire COVID, we didn't see a huge decrease in establishment applications. We saw some, but not as much. And I think that has a lot to do with possibly changing of hands of salons. There's a lot of that in our industry. We get a lot of applications annually, but we rarely see a huge increase in the number of licensed establishments. And that's because they change from one owner to another so often. So we're still a total of 619,000 plus licenses that are registered. So that is the licensing statistics. DRC is next. DRC has not been meeting. However, we are scheduling our first hearing where we will discuss appeals that have been submitted in written testimony. So that's something that is new and a way for us to hold these hearings with complying with all of our COVID concerns. And I just wanted to pause real quick and make sure, I see Derek's hand is up, so I wasn't sure if that was from before or if he had a question. Oh, okay. All right, so moving on, we have, moving to page 13 is our enforcement statistics. Enforcement is the one area that went the opposite direction during COVID. You can see that on the very top line of our complaints received, in April through June, we received 2,686 complaints, and that's significantly higher than what we normally received. And that is due to the number of complaints that we received of people stating that salons are violating the order. So that is a variety. It could be this salon, they're not wearing masks, or it could have been during the complete closure. We received complaints of people who stated that establishments were open violating the order. So that number increased dramatically. And then, of course, our citations issued down towards the bottom is significantly lower, and that's because our inspectors are out in the field However, we're trying to take a more educational approach as opposed to writing citations. We want to be concerned of the safety of our staff. So they're doing minimal contact with establishments and really trying to provide information, providing our checklist, providing mask information, and things like that.
Christy,
And then,
I have a question.
yes.
I see that for inspections in April through June, we had 0 inspections, yet we had citations. Can you explain that?
Oh, sure. The citations were from the previous month. It takes quite some time to get through our process.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So moving to page 14, again at the bottom chart displays the monthly complaints received by fiscal years. So again, we just wanted to show the difference between a regular year and our COVID year. So you can see in the month of May, the complaints received was drastically increased, as well as June was doubled. So that is just a comparison to show some information of the workload we've been dealing with. And moving on is our standard budget fiscal year expenditures, as well as our fund condition that we regularly provide. And moving to page 17 is the outreach update. And on that, you can see the outreach that has been done. I guess it's all been done by me. And the various calls that I've participated in, and some outreach events that we've done with some legislative offices, as well as county offices, or interviews, and some association calls that I have attended. So that's just information for that. Is there any questions? I see Callie Mae.
Thank you, Christy. Returning to page 15 for the projected expenditures, I was just curious. I did notice that some items are looks like they're projected to be much higher this year than what was originally allotted. I'm curious, what are the consultant and professional services external? Because that expense seems to be much higher than expected.
So it's the consultant and professional services are, let me just look real quick. It is a portion of our exam because we contract with the national exam, and the national exam, we have different, it goes into different line items for our budget. We are working with our budget office to get this cleaned up so you don't see any red, because our expenditures are very consistent over many, many years. And it's just a job that our budget analyst has to work on reallocating those items correctly. So it's not something new that we are seeing this year. It's been that way for years and years, and we are hoping to get that finally cleaned up so you won't see the red items.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so moving on to page 19 is our practice status survey results, which is pretty much our standard information. And that concludes the executive officer's report, unless anybody has any additional questions. And I see Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. I had a question, page 18, going back to some of, I guess, the events that you participated in. The one on August 11th, the Barberside Forum.
Yes.
My question was, I know that during this time, Barberside has kind of been at the table, and they've been kind of stepping up their promotion of their product, and they came up with a guideline initially in other states before California for safe practices. They came out with a COVID-19 certification, which a lot of barbers and industry salons, Cosmos, took part in getting that certification. At that forum, was it discussed how they came up with that certification? Is that something that is like a board-approved certification in different states as well as California? Or is that just something that them as a company does with hopes that, I guess it would be informative for stylists and salon owners?
So it is not board approved. It is something that they did. I think that there might be some states that have a little more flexibility and are requiring it, or there could be even some schools that require it, but it is an optional program. And so this forum that I did on that day was Barbicide did a series of interviews, and they wanted some regulatory feedback. And so it actually talked about board structure and what a board's role is. So it didn't necessarily talk about disinfection, which kind of we so associate Barbicide with. I can tell you that I have taken their course, even though I'm not a licensee, but I found it very informative. And I actually had my entire staff take it because I thought it was really good, and it's free, but it's definitely Barbicide's own item that they promoted. And I do think, though, that there are other states that might require it as part of their schooling, but not us.
Thank you for that clarification. Is during these times, I mean, is that something that the state maybe have thought about? A basic kind of refresher course or I guess a COVID certification as well that licensees can take to be more equipped or prepared?
The only issue we would have is we cannot require anything of licensees unless it is in unless we have the statutory authority to require it. So I don't believe this is something that we could require. We also don't like to recommend one particular product line. So there are other product lines. I'm not sure if others do the same type of thing. So as a state entity, we don't promote other items like products. So it's not something that we could do unless we had a bill go through the process that would allow us to possibly set regulations to require that.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Christy, I want to talk about on page 19, the last chart there.
Uh-huh.
At a glance, it looks like there's a significant difference between having a booth renter operating in the assessment versus an independent contractor. But then if you look at the scale, it's really only 13 different. Is there a way to adjust it so it doesn't look so skewed, or make
Sure.
a pie chart or something like that going forward?
I see what
Okay.
you mean. And yes, we'll look at that.
Thank you.
And did Jackie have a question? No?
I was just, well, you pretty much, you cleared it up about, not promoting one product, because that's what we are using in all 4 of my locations. Is Barbicide is on every station to spray in between each client, as well as we temperature check and, mask and everything. So we're doing everything that is required to help keep everybody safe. So I see, though, where you couldn't just have one product, but I mean, maybe we'll talk more about it when we get into COVID, just to help the industry know, what steps to take as best as can to be as safe as possible.
Right. Okay, seeing no further questions, that is the end of my executive officer report.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, so as I had mentioned before, we will be moving agenda item number 8 up to follow. So right now we're actually going to move into the discussion and possible action regarding rulemaking proposals. So Christy, do you want to give us an overview of this?
Sure. So before I talk about the personal service permit, that is the only item we are talking about that needs action today. All remaining regulatory packages are still moving through the process. And so that is just a status update that you have there in your memo. So on the personal service permit, we talked about this at our last meeting, and we had just done a 15-day comment, and we approved that comment. And now when we submitted the final report, there was an omission of the PSP report that was done many, many years ago. So to add that information into our final package, we needed to do another 15-day comment period. I believe this is the last time we will have to do a 15-day comment period. I certainly hope it is. However, before the board today, we have the comments that were received in regards to adding that additional information to our final packet. And we have in your packets the prepared responses that have been done to the comments that we did receive. So what we need from the board today is a motion to approve, to move forward to direct staff to reject the comments provided and to complete the regulatory process on this package.
Okay, so there is a request for a motion unless there are questions from board members. Jackie?
Let's do a motion to approve the staff to be able to move forward and deny and reject the comments.
Thank you.
This
Andrew?
is Sabina.
Oh.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sabina.
Who was that? Jackie who just did the motion?
Yes.
Okay, Jackie. So if you look on page agenda item 8, to make this a much cleaner packet and motion, the motion is actually written right there where it says action needed, and it says so. To direct staff to reject the comments, provide the responses right there. That would be your motion. I can read it, but so it would be to direct staff to, is that?
Got it.
Sorry?
I got what you're saying. I'll rephrase it. So the motion would be, in order to continue the regulatory process of the PSP package, board staff is to direct staff to reject the comments provided, the response to the comments as indicated in the meeting materials, and complete the regulatory process.
Great, there you go. Good job.
All right, thank you. Andrew?
I will second that motion.
Okay, great. So we have a motion on the floor. At this time, we will open this up for public comment. And a reminder that public comment is only for agenda item number 8 in regards to the motion that has been made.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a public comment on this agenda item, please click on that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom center of your WebEx screen. We're currently sharing instructions on the screen for your reference. In the Ask field, typically in the lower right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, please type, "I would like to make a public comment," and send to all panelists. As a reminder, this Q&A feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent they would like to verbally make a comment. Once you're unmuted, you may verbally state your comment, but this is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board. Such inquiries submitted using this feature will not be answered. And I will pause a moment to allow public time to access that Q&A panel. And just as a general reminder, the raised hand feature is only being used as a means for the board members to indicate that they would like to make a comment. We will not be responding to raised hands from attendees. All right, this is the moderator again. At this time, it looks like there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right, the Q&A panel is now closed.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor with no public comments, so we will go ahead and move for a vote from all board members. I will go through the list. Please vote as I call your name. I will start actually with Steve Weeks.
Steve Weeks, yes.
Thank you. Dr. Carrie Williams.
Dr. Carrie Williams, yes.
Thank you. Jackie Crabtree.
Jackie Crabtree, yes.
Thank you. Calumet Pham.
Callie Mae Pham, yes.
Thank you. Andrew Dropkin.
Andrew Drafkin, yes.
Thank you. And Lisa Thong, yes. Okay, so that concludes agenda item number 8. Is that correct, Christy, or is there anything else you wanted to discuss?
Nope, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. And it was brought to my attention that actually for agenda item number 5, Executive Officer's Report, we did not open for public comments after Christy's report. So I'm going to go back on the agenda to open up for public comment. Moderator, if you could please do so.
All right, at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click on that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom center of your WebEx screen. We have instructions on the screen for your reference. As a reminder, public comment at this time is only for agenda item 5 on the EO report. And also as a reminder to members of the public, we will not be responding to raised hands. If you would like to make a public comment on this agenda item, please go into the Q&A feature and type "I would like to make a comment" in the chat and then send to all panelists. I'll pause a moment to allow members of the public time to access that Q&A feature. This is the moderator. It looks like there was a request to repeat the agenda item for public comment. This is agenda item 5, the Executive Officer's Report. If you would like to make a public comment on agenda item 5 for the executive, okay. Dee Dee, give me one moment while I find you in my attendee list. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second time warning. All right, and I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, good morning. Happy Monday, everybody. My name is Dee Dee Crossett. I'm the owner of the, excuse me, I'm in San Francisco. The smoke is bad and I'm losing my voice. I'm the owner of the San Francisco Institute of Aesthetics and Cosmetology, also a licensed esthetician and establishment owner and former board member. Just to follow up on the exams, we were approved for distance learning and had continue to submit applications, both for people that had graduated all the way in January and pre-applications as well. We have people that just graduated that have test dates coming up in December, and we have people that graduated in January, pre-app students that are still waiting for test dates. So I know you can't comment in this, but there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason in regards to who's getting a test date and who isn't, and that's been really frustrating for the students to figure out how is it that somebody started school 3 months or graduated 3 or 4 months after me getting a test date. Also, for those that had test dates during COVID, during the shutdown, the initial shutdown, those future professionals or our graduates are still waiting. It doesn't seem to make a difference what program they're in, but they're all definitely still waiting to get test dates. And from a school perspective, if you communicate with us the process, I'm more than happy to give that information back to the students, both that are currently enrolled and also the
30
graduates.
seconds.
It'll help us alleviate some of the traffic going into the board if we have a better idea on how you're scheduling the test dates as well. We're happy to work with you guys on that too. And thanks for everything you're doing. I know this is wild, so I appreciate you. Thank you.
Hi, Dee Dee, it's Christy, and good to hear your voice, and I'm going to give you a call directly and talk to you about it. And any other schools that are listening, we're happy to work with them directly as well.
All right, this is the moderator. It looks like there are no more requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
All right, the Q&A panel is now closed.
Okay, thank you. So going back to agenda item number 6, board discussion and update regarding impact of COVID-19 on licensing, examinations, outreach, and enforcement. Christy, would you like to provide the board with an update on where we are at for the industry on this?
I sure will. So, as was mentioned earlier, the governor released a new tiered system for opening businesses. We currently have 23 counties that are completely open to our industry, and we have 32 counties that are hair only, and the remaining of those services, the skin and nails, are allowed outside. So that's 32 counties that are in that situation. We have 2 counties that are opening with restrictions, and their restrictions are stating that they hair is open, skin and nails can be open if it does not require the removal or adjusting of a face mask. So basically that rules out facials. And then there are some counties that have restricted certain types of facial services altogether. And then there's also counties that are limiting capacity. And so that's been a challenging issue for us and the industry to figure out what that capacity is. So that's definitely something that we're working on. The system is based on the counties. The counties are making a lot of decisions that we are trying to stay on top of to understand where we are in the first place. So we check the counties every day, and we're also trying to reach out to many counties to provide some additional clarification. One of the things we're noticing right now is there are counties that are opening aesthetic services in med spas, but not allowing aesthetic services in a licensed establishment that is just a licensed establishment. So we're trying to educate those counties that really it is the same thing. We licensed med spas, there really is not a license for a med spa. It's usually the doctors comply with their requirements and they still obtain an establishment license from us, as you all know, and still have licensed estheticians in a single room providing facial services. So that's something we're trying to reach out to specific counties and inform them of that distinction. I think it's just a misunderstanding that they believe estheticians that might be working in medical spas might be under different requirements than what they actually are. So that's something we just are trying to assist the counties with. That is definitely a daily issue that we're dealing with now, is tracking how the counties are changing each day and trying to update our own personal tracking list so we know who is where and what county is doing what. Our inspectors are in the field. We continue to operate on an educational basis. It's been a lot of shifting for our inspectors. We went from being closed to being open, and then being open with limited services. So now in the current situation, they have to remember what county they're in. And of course, many of our inspectors cover multiple counties. So that's been challenging for us. However, we are still in an educational mode. So what we're doing now is providing our checklist to salons, reminding them of the governor's orders. And now we are just going to be starting this week with a campaign to kind of promote masks. We are seeing a slight decrease in the number of masks that people are wearing. We don't want the openings to go back in the wrong direction. So we are creating a postcard that our inspectors can hand out, and we're going to have that in multiple languages just to remind people to wear a mask. So that's going to be our focus probably for the next few weeks, is really promoting the mask wearing, and that will help prevent the spread. A couple of interesting items on our workload based on COVID. I mean, I talked a little bit about it during our statistics review, but we do have 4 individuals from our office that have been directed to become contact tracers. So that is something that we are adjusting with workload as well. And then, of course, our state offices are all furloughed for 2 days a month. So we have that to contend with monitoring our workload, especially now that workload is starting to increase. And then exams are at half capacity, which I mentioned earlier, and that's been definitely our biggest challenge. To those schools that are listening, there's been a big confusion with people's anticipated date from their pre-app to what their actual date is. Because so many schools submit pre-apps, we're having to call schools to figure out if those students actually did graduate, because usually those students will provide that information at the exam site. So we're kind of having to change a lot of our processes that we had before COVID to adapt to what we still have going on. We are looking at a plan right now to increase our exams. And one of the things we're going to be doing is, it's our Glendale site that is the most impacted. And it's mostly impacted with our manicuring and esthetician students, because there's right now so many more of those. And so we're looking at doing mega days, is what we call it, where we actually open several more exam slots in the day. And so we're hoping that will help with our backlog in exams. And so that's kind of an update of where we are as a board with the impact of COVID that's happening with us here. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I'm sorry, there's no hand raise feature for me right now, so I just hit the unmute. Well, Christy, thank you for that update. I had a question in regard to the masks. I know that we mentioned that during, I guess, some esthetician services, masks are required. Is there any distinction between each field, barbering, cosmos, in regard to masks? I know that as a barber, in our shops, we don't promote the removal of the mask. However, each county is different. Is there something, a distinction that we can put out for the removal of these masks? Meaning, if somebody wants a shave, we've eliminated shaves and beard trims, but I do see many businesses still offering those services. That can create a challenge going forward as far as the removal of the mask. So is there any possible way that we can add that in there, or is that something that the inspectors are looking towards? Is that written in those guidelines or that postcard that you mentioned to let barbershops know whether they can or they cannot do those particular services?
So it's not, the problem is it's county by county. And so that's why when we get that question, we tell people that they absolutely need to check with their county because they're all, many are the same, but there are a lot of counties, especially in our Bay Area, that are making, and some of the, the big cities like Los Angeles are making additional requirements for this industry. So I don't know that it's something that we would put on a postcard because it could change by the county at any given moment. And we don't normally promote the county's requirements in any of our publications, but it's definitely something that we're responding to questions, but we really have to promote people to double check with their counties. And that's, I think, probably one of the most confusing items that we have, because I don't believe the industry is used to that. We certainly weren't as board staff. So we have links to all of our counties that we are giving to people that email us, and we are referring them to their county. Jackie, did you have a question?
I do, Christy. So I'm looking at our county in Sacramento, and I went to the county website, but I'm not seeing if it says specifically occupancy limit. All I see is 6 feet social distancing. Am I correct on that?
I believe you're correct. We can double check, but I do not believe that our county has a capacity requirement.
Thank you.
In fact, I believe Los Angeles, San Francisco, possibly, and Santa Clara all have some additional requirements. So if anyone's in those counties, I highly recommend that you look at those specific county requirements. And I think that's it for me. So I'll turn it back over to the board president.
Thanks, Christy. I'd really like to take this time with this agenda item to hear from my fellow board members regarding where we think the industry should be at this point in time in pandemic, but also looking forward into the future, knowing that we likely will have to prepare for a second wave of pandemic. I'd really like to think about what we can do as a board to be prepared, and especially with how the state's orders are now really leaving it up to counties. I'm wondering what we can do to be proactive in informing counties what we think would be a best practice. And I don't know what the parameters are for that in terms of information that we would be able to put out as a board. But I would welcome thoughts from my fellow board members in terms of how you think our licensees can be practicing safely. Jackie, hands up.
I like that you're asking that, Lisa. And again, I want to thank you so much for going to the table and trying to get the political world to understand how our industry works. I 100% feel that as long as everyone is wearing a mask in the salon and keeping social distance and sanitizing between each guest, there's no reason that everybody shouldn't be able to work. Nails, skincare, hair, I just think as long as you're masked. I get it that facials would be a difficult thing to do without removing the mask, and that causes, exposure. So, but I do feel 100% that we can work safely, and there's no reason to close any of us again. We did it for the 6 weeks we were open. We didn't have any problem, like you were saying. So I don't know what more, especially since they are not getting any contact tracing from salons that have been across, what we're seeing across the U.S. So I don't know what more information they could have to think that we need to go back to being closed again if we spike. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Jackie. Derek, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, and thank you for that as well, Jackie. I do agree in the fact that we are equipped to operate safely. I would think that to your point and to your question, Lisa, I think that the confusion lies with, 30 plus counties having different guidelines. I think that we have to learn from what we just came out of. And if we're going to push to have a voice and a seat at the table and so forth, I think that who better than us to be able to set forth parameters or guidelines going forward. In regard to the removal of face masks, county by county and extended exposure periods of time and so forth, we know that some services are 5 minutes and some services could be 30 minutes or an hour. Maybe we ought to take the initiative to create some sort of guide or path for a limited amount of time. With the counties setting up these parameters and the state setting up the parameters of the purple, red, orange, yellow, that's a broad kind of parameter in which to operate in. And maybe we can come up with something similar to say these services are acceptable, these services are not acceptable, or limited capacity, whatever the case may be, so we don't have that confusion. I think one of the biggest problems that we saw throughout this time is, it's so easy for me being in Contra Costa to say, okay, Contra Costa's closed, but I can drive 10 minutes to Alameda County and sit inside a restaurant or do whatever I want. And I mean, these borders are not closed county by county, is what I'm saying. If there's a pandemic going on and there's airborne illness, and all, what stops anybody from going one to the other and continuing to spread? So I think we have to look at that subjectively and say, okay, what is going to be best overall in this short term so that we can execute the long term? I think that's the biggest thing going forward. With the 15-day and 21-day guidelines and so forth, excess of exposure or spikes or what have you, whatever the case may be, maybe we should look towards doing something similar. Let's say, okay, the next 14 days, we're going to set these parameters in which to operate. And then once we get the clear, we can go and do full services or what have you. I don't want to continue to limit this, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying, because we all want to get back to work. But I think it is necessary for us to get the finger on this, the pulse of what's happening, if we are going to be able to contribute going forward.
Thank you, Derek. Andrew, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit more long term. It's like I wasn't even thinking about what happens if a second wave comes. I was thinking more of the next pandemic. And I think we need to work with the legislature on basically providing the safety net that if they're going to try to, if there is a need to shut down an industry for public safety, what is the support for that industry? There should be a plan for, all right, if, unemployment, if you're putting an industry out of business for no fault of their own, to get, support, financial especially, without having to wait 6 to 8 weeks at a minimum to get that, because bills don't wait 6 to 8 weeks. I know, the legislature just passed the bill SB 275, which is providing a plan for stockpiled of PPE for essential workers. So I'm wondering if there's down the road we can work with the legislature to try to develop basically a pandemic safety net, if you will, for things like that. The other thing is that maybe work with the legislature to define what is, how essential work is defined. Saying our industry is not essential may be correct, but neither is selling motorcycles. But motorcycle stores have been open. So I just don't understand the logic, and so maybe some definitions of working with the legislature on defining that, and more of a pandemic plan, if you will, for the long term would be something that maybe they can be brought up if sunset ever happens again, et cetera, when it's our bite at the apple to speak with the legislature.
Thank you, Andrew. I think those are really great suggestions. We definitely should consider including as part of Sunset some type of contingency planning or work. And I especially appreciate you pointing out this definition of essential, because that did come up in the conversation that Christy and I had with Department of Public Health and the governor's office. And they didn't really have a definition. They themselves pointed out that it seemed a bit, it could come across as, vague, and that retail was allowed to open and yet the salon industry was not. So for my other fellow board members, are there other suggestions or thoughts that you would like to share? I do not see any hands raised. So I'm going to try my best to summarize a bit of what I've heard and ask the staff if it would be possible to work on some of these things and report back to the board at our next meeting. And I think top of mind would be to take a look at a number of different approaches, one being with the legislature and a plan for some legislative solutions to address impact on the industry during times of pandemic or other emergency situations in which the industry is being shut down. Additionally, with what Derek had raised, looking at standardization of a recommendation for counties that could include a limitation of services to specific time limits. And I'm wondering if what we would need to look at is the current tiered approach and what we believe would need to be implemented for those various tiers for licensees to operate safely. Christy, do you have thoughts on how we can summarize some of the suggestions here and have staff work on either recommendations or a plan?
Yes, I think we could definitely put together some recommendations. I think it's definitely going to be something we could possibly put a document together that we could provide to counties, especially as these counties are moving to open. I think if we provide them with information on more understanding of the industry, that maybe they will take that into consideration as they make their own requirements that are above and beyond what the governor has put out.
Great. I think that if we could also put together maybe an FAQ that quickly summarizes or addresses, I think, some of the misinformation that these counties are operating. For instance, they seem to believe that each of our services are operating under different regulations. They're not, they're all operating under the same regulations from our board. I know that I've asked this question of the difference between why a dental office is able to operate versus a salon, which for us, we have ventilation requirements. And I think in your conversation with the executive officer of the dental board, we found that the state dental board doesn't actually have any regulations regarding ventilation. So I think if we can present information to not just the counties, but also to Department of Public Health and the governor's office to help them understand the different ways in which our industry is really well equipped to be safe during this time. And if we can plan to meet with Department of Public Health again regarding what we put together, I think that would be a good first step.
I agree. I think that's a great idea.
A few other things from the meeting that we had that I would like to ask for follow-up on with CDPH, since they did agree to work with us if we were to conduct outreach activities. Can you provide an update or report back on outreach in conjunction with CDPH over the next couple of months? Especially with in-language outreach. I know that CDPH has taken a very long time to translate their materials. And I know that you have offered to assist with translating their guidelines. Do we know if their latest guidelines have been translated and are up? Because at the time of our conversation, that was not the case.
The original guidelines have been translated into many languages. I do not believe that the guidelines for working outside have been translated. I would have to double check on that, but I'm not aware that that has been done.
Okay. Maybe we can offer to help CDPH with translation if they need that to speed up the process. I'd also like to see from the staff a plan for in-language media outreach to make sure that our in-language communities and licensees have the information that they need. I know that there's a lot of confusion about how to operate or what is being asked, and I know it would be difficult with county by county differences, but maybe this is an opportunity to offer partnership with counties to build that relationship if we invite them to be a part of our in-language media outreach efforts or other outreach efforts as well. Any other thoughts from my fellow board members?
Lisa, I just had one question. During all the smoke and the fire these last few weeks, and continue the hazardous air quality that we're hearing all over the news, they're telling us to stay indoors, keep the windows closed, the doors closed, no need to go outside. Our licensees that are operating outside, they fall victim to these conditions. Has there been a halt? Has anybody stated that we should not be outside? And is there a plan to either inform them of this in regard to how we regulate public health or public safety? And if so, is there a date to when they can go back outside for those industries that are not able to work back indoors?
So that's a really good question. I have not heard any updates regarding, concerns about safety of workers outside during this time. And I will share that it was really disappointing when I raised this issue with California Department of Public Health. I actually pointed to the fact that we were exchanging one hazardous work environment for another. by asking licensees to work outdoors during this time period, their response to me, well, first of all, their response was that these licensees should not be working at all, which I found very disappointing to hear. As we all know, that solution is not a good solution, to ask that salons simply just not be providing services at all. And that's where that conversation ended. There was no offer of a time to meet to talk about a different solution. That was the only response that was offered to me. So to my knowledge, and Christy, I don't know if you've heard about anything in terms of, any plans for, any plans to address outdoor service during this time period with fires and bad air quality.
No, not specifically related to our industry. I have not.
Andrew, I see your hands up. Andrew, you're on mute. I'm not sure if...
Oh, I was unmuted and then I unmuted myself, or I muted myself. Because we're dealing with things sometimes on county by county basis, and we're kind of not seen, we're not considered essential. We're not, quote unquote, a large employer. It's like if I was Stanislaus County and somebody from Gallo Wine called, they might take my call, kind of a thing. But because I'm not a large employer, I might not get somebody on the phone. When we deal with some of these elected officials and state officials, if we can maybe give account of how many licensees, how many establishments are in the county, to kind of like show how large we really are, how much of an employer, how much the employment affects that county, how many establishments, if they're all closed, aren't paying their landlords rent, then there's going to be vacancies in their community. It might help us throw our weight around a little bit more. Just a thought.
Thanks, Andrew. And this is just my perspective on this, but I actually feel that a lot of the legislators and elected officials are hearing from licensees. I know that at least in the Bay Area, I believe Ash Cholera issued a letter to the governor before the new orders. And so I think our biggest challenge right now is actually Department of Public Health. Even at the county level, it is the Department of Public Health that is making these decisions, and we're seeing that at our own state level as well. And so I do think that your suggestion may be impactful in sharing with the county Department of Public Health officials. But I think also pairing that with information about the industry and helping to address some of these myths or misinformation that it seems like these health officials are operating under. I think it would be helpful if they would just take the time to understand some of our regulations, because based on the orders that they're issuing, it's very clear that they have very little understanding of how this industry actually operates. Any other comments? Jackie?
And I also believe, from my own personal experience, I've done the last two governors' wife's hair, Maria Shriver as well as Anne Brown Gust. And I still have a relationship and had spoke about our situation. So I tried my best of my contacts of who I know. But what I will say about the people, I don't think they realize the amount of money that is made in our industry. So when they talk about that, I think sometimes there's just this misconception of, oh, they're just a hairstylist or a barber or a nail person. They don't realize how much money I don't feel really that we do generate in our industry. So that would be something else I think would help them, hopefully.
Thank you, Jackie. Other comments or questions from board members? I don't see any hands raised at this time, so I will move to open for public comment at this time.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please click on that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom center of your WebEx screen. We're currently sharing instructions for your reference right now. And as a reminder, this Q&A feature is only being used as a means for members of the public to represent they would like to verbally make a comment. Once you are unmuted, that member of the public may verbally state their comment. This is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board, and such inquiries submitted using this feature will not be answered. Looks like we do have a couple individuals who would like to make public comment. We'll go ahead and start with, apologies, let me scroll up. My Q&A is very small. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with individual identified as Wendy. Wendy, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. All right, Wendy, I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my comment. This is Wendy Cochran from California Aesthetic Alliance. I appreciate being here with you today. Usually in person is a little easier for us to conduct all these meetings and get all the comments in. One of the things that I want to point out to you is that San Diego County and Los Angeles County both are in a situation where they have reported community outbreaks. Los Angeles County does report them publicly and call out the business name, and San Diego County has more than 8 in the last month. So if you want to make sure, these are the 2 counties that I see statewide that are having this data reported. Also, I really feel right now that our sunset report needs to kind of have another set of eyes on this, because we do have a very crucial situation in which the estheticians that haven't had a revision in scope of practice since 1978 have a lot of things that have changed because of the pandemic, and we are the ones that are probably most impacted along the side with the folks from electrology. So I really want to make sure that we probably swing back around and take another look at sunset and what's in there for our scope of practice revision. And also, I do want to say for the board members, please don't compare industries. We have enough people thinking that what we do is the same as somebody that works at Home Depot that takes money and cuts a board. And that's not true. We work 10 inches from a client's face for quite a long time. And it's a very critical thing that we do and provide to the public. Thank you again. And thank you for all the work for the electrology people that you were able to help us accomplish through the LGBTQ caucus and allow those folks to resume work indoors on a state.
All right, 2 minutes has been up, so I went ahead and muted her microphone, and we will move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Fred Jones. Fred, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Good morning, everybody. This is Fred Jones with the Professional Beauty Federation of California. I was very moved by your opening statements this morning and with your deliberation on this agenda item just now. Thank you very much, Lisa, Christy, and others for working behind the scenes to try to educate and inform the decision makers about the safety of our industry. And also about the inappropriateness, these are my words, not yours, of discriminating against women and immigrants. Because 95% of our estheticians are women, and 3/4 of our nail salons are first-generation Vietnamese. And it's very inappropriate that the governor and now a few counties have decided to distinguish and discriminate within our industry. Your state board doesn't even distinguish establishment licenses, whether it's a nail salon, a spa, or a barber shop. It's the same establishment license. And thank you, Lisa, for pointing out to them that our nail and skin services are a lot safer than a dental hygienist or an orthodontist procedure. And thank you, Derek and others, for calling out the insanity of asking these women and immigrants to work outside in incredibly bad air quality with smoke and heat. Bottom line is, I do not feel, and the PBFC does not feel, it is appropriate to delegate oversight to county health departments. Our industry has been licensed by the state board since 1927. So we would like the state board to assert itself, reassert its dominance and oversight of our industry, and not delegate that responsibility to county health bureaucrats. Thank you.
All right, we will move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as DD. And just as a reminder to members of the public, we will not be responding to raised hands. If you would like to make a public comment, you do need to type in the Q&A feature of WebEx, "I would like to make a comment." We will also additionally not be responding to any inquiries that in the Q&A feature that aren't, "I would like to make a comment." The Q&A feature is only being used as a means for you to indicate that you would like to verbally make a comment. Dee, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I'm going to unmute your microphone now.
Hey, it's me again. Thank you. I just want to tag team a little bit on the feedback that this is elitism to say that our industry, portions of it that are made up of 90% women, 70% minorities, that they are not, with hundreds of hours of training, qualified to create a health and safety environment when you can walk into Chipotle or Target and apparently they are qualified. We have a state license, so it's super frustrating. The most important thing for me in going to the legislature is that we're talking low risk versus high risk. And I don't think calling businesses essential or non-essential is helpful because it's too subjective. We need to think about, if you are a business that can open in a low risk environment, you should be allowed to open. If you're high risk, you're not allowed to open. And I think creating a checklist and a system so that this industry knows what they need to do to be low risk versus high risk is going to get us out of this. Are we an acceptable industry, and are we essential? Because it's not for anyone else to determine whether we're essential or not. The German health minister came out and recently said that if they had had the information on the virus when it first launched that they have now, they would not have shut down retirement centers and they would not have shut down, they called it beauty salons. So there is information out there to suggest that we are low risk. And when we wear face shields and face masks and practice proper health and safety, we are not going to spread the virus. As was shown to the 2 young women that were in the Midwest, none of their clients, 140 people went through that salon. And although they were pre-symptomatic for COVID, no one in the salon got the virus. So thank you for taking my public comment.
All right, we will move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Susie Wong. Susie, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you, commissioners and board. And I am representing the Sacramento Nails Association, a new nonprofit that was formed just a couple of months ago based on the COVID-19 guidelines. We are collaborating and with the Professional Beauty Federation of California. We thank Fred Jones for being a great partner. Our group represents the Vietnamese American nail salon owners and manicurists, and the majority of them, even on the board, Vietnamese is their main language. So we want to educate and outreach to the members. We have just sent a letter to the governor, our second letter, which we actually sent a copy over to Christy as well, and we have been talking with the API Legislative Caucus, and we are rounding up support from all levels of government. But the letter was also signed by Nailing It for America, which is out of Orange County, representing Vietnamese nail
30
salons
seconds.
there. And also Bay Area, San Jose and Bay Area. So we look forward to our continuing communication with the BBC and collaborating with the Professional Beauty Federation to reopen indoors and educate as well on safety measures that nail salons are taking that should qualify them to reopen indoors. Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Kaylee D. Dang. Kaylee, you will be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Fred, to talk about nail and helping us. I'm just wonder that, you guys all know that how much hard work we put in the nail salon in order to have safety environment for nail tech and also customer. But right now, like, you guys all know the air pollution is so bad. When the hair salon reopen, indoor nail salon cannot, that is something is not right. We in the same industry and we do personal care, so we do same guideline and we have the same license. Then I don't know why that the state board doesn't raise the voice for us to reopen, because we've been closed like more than 5 months already and we're dying if we cannot reopen indoor. With this air pollution, our nail tech will die before we can catch the coronavirus. So I hope you guys will raise your voice up to help us out. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator again. We'll go ahead and move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Heidi Lowry. Heidi, you will be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, my name is Heidi Lowry. I am a licensed cosmetologist of 20 years. I was working as an employee and I've switched to being more of an independent contractor given the circumstances. I work in a very small salon with quite a few people. One of the concerns that I wanted to bring to the board's attention was that when we have the free COVID testing sites and we're not listed as essential, it is very difficult to actually find a testing site for free. And I know a lot of the hairstylists in the industry do not have, a nail and everybody does not have healthcare. It's not part of, a lot of the common issue. That's a common issue. So it would be really helpful if the board would also speak up to allow for free testing through the state and also through the counties. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to the next individual who's requested public comment. Individual identified as Satan. Sa, you will be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone right now.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sa Thong, and I'm part of Sacramento Nail Association. Thank you for all the work that you guys doing. And I just have a comment beside that. So the fact that personal care is essential, but also making a living also essential as well. So we know that we have to live with the virus for a long time. So I think we need to find a way to adapt. I mean, we have to find a way to make a living. And by that said, I think we have to work with a guideline to open safety indoor to make us all have like a living support, because if we keep closing into the virus, and I think our lives end too. So that's just my comment. Thank you for listening.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Louis Nguyen. I will go ahead and you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. My name is Louis Nguyen. I'm the president of SNA, which is Sacramento Nail Association. There's a few of us here today representing a mass majority of the nail salon owner and technician that's in this industry. I have two comments on behalf of the group. One is I got a last minute request from one of the members to have the direction translated into Vietnamese. So a lot of them wanted to call in, but then we ran into the problem of not having a translator on site. So I told them that the BBC is aware of this, and in the future, if more people call in that will speak Vietnamese, that service will be provided. The second question, that comment I would like to add, is that the county to county reopening in slow phases, I don't believe that it worked, because our salon have been opening outdoor the past month since the guidance has been allowed to open outdoor. We have been getting customer all the way from even San Jose, San Francisco, and the NorCal, driving close to 1.5 hours to Sacramento to get that service done. So that will not limit if the belief the spread is starting from nail salon, which we know it's not true. So I would like to have the board emphasize that to the governor, that it doesn't work and we are safe, we're professional, we've been trained, and we are under BBC. So I don't believe that is an issue. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. It looks like that was the last of the individuals who has requested public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
All right, the Q&A feature is now closed.
Thank you. I want to just say thank you to everyone who was present to make public comments. I think the board is in agreement with a lot that has been stated. Christy, regarding this agenda item, is there anything further that you need from the board members in terms of direction for how to proceed?
No, I think I have a very good understanding of where our board members stand, and we will move forward.
Okay, thank you. And also for the last comment regarding translation of directions for, I believe that was in reference to joining the board meetings. Is that something that would be possible for us to do?
It is. We will make sure that our future agendas are actually translated into our regular languages, and we are not able to provide interpreters, but we certainly would welcome interpreters. So we'll make that clear on our next announcement of our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if no further comments or questions from my board members, we can move on to agenda item number 7, legislative update. So Christy, did you want to cover this?
Yes, I just have one legislative update. That is SB 1474, which is the one-year extension of our sunset. And this bill actually has now been enrolled and is with the governor's office. So we're waiting for the final decision from the governor on that. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to agenda item number 9. This is for public comment on items not on the agenda.
Right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please click on that icon of a question mark within a square located at the bottom center of your WebEx screen. We're currently sharing instructions on your screen for reference. In the Ask field, typically in the lower right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, please type, "I would like to make a public comment," and send to all panelists. And as a reminder, the Q&A feature is only being used as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once you are unmuted, you may verbally state your comment. This is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board, and such inquiries using this feature will not be answered. Right, and it looks like we do have one individual who has identified that they would like to make a public comment. Individual identified as Dee Dee. Dee Dee, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Great, thank you. Again, this is Dee Dee, licensed esthetician, dean of the San Francisco Institute of Aesthetics and Cosmetology, and also former establishment owner and board member. I'm wondering if there's any way, and I know you can't answer, but to think about it for in the future. When I was on the board, we talked about trying to get schools information on exam results so that we could make good decisions based on our curriculum. So for example, all we get is a quarterly report that states whether someone passed or failed. And without giving away too much information about the exam, it would be great to know as an educator if, for example, when my students are failing a certain portion of the exam or not getting the points, it'd be great to know what that was so that we could update our curriculum and make good decisions and make sure that we're training them so when they get out with their license, we're educating them, or maybe we've got something messed up or wrong, or the textbook isn't giving them the correct information. So we just know if they pass or fail. We'd love to get information on where our opportunities are so we can update our curriculum. Also, in terms of testing, if we're open, and I think a lot of schools are, to speed things up, if it was possible to open up our facilities and have students tested on site, if you wanted to send the examiner out to us. Most of the schools are bigger than the state board facility, and we have tons of stations and can practice safe social distancing. If that was an option, we're open to that. Also taking a look at the written exam, and I know traditionally we like to do same-day licensure, but if there was a way to allow, we have more written testing sites than we do physical testing sites. So at least get the written portion out of the way and allow students to get that going so that they can at least see some light at the end of the tunnel. And if we fall back in, we can get them tested and licensed sooner. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. And I apologize if I mispronounce your name, individual identified as Jaime. I'll go ahead and you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Hi, this is Jamie Schrabeck from Precision Nails, a licensed manicurist and employee-based salon owner. I just want to comment that our arguments citing our training and licensure would have much greater impact if we required continuing education in our state, which of course we don't do. That was brought to a highlight when it was mentioned that the certificate of training never expires and that someone could apply for their exam having attended school 20 years ago. I'm sure many of us have had our licenses for that long or even longer. And if we were able to require CE, then we would know that we'd have the most up-to-date training. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. We'll move on to the next individual who has requested public comment. Individual identified as Thea Daniels, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. I am unmuting your microphone now.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for a very informative meeting. I have been in the industry for over 30 years, and I'm a hairstylist in Santa Rosa, and we do care about the health and safety of the public and have followed all of the strict guidelines that have been literally forced upon us as business owners. I am an independent contractor, and being able to make a living has been cut in half following the guidelines, and the threat of future shutdowns is very concerning to me as a stylist. Everybody in my salon passed the barbicide exam. All of us took it willingly, wanting to be able to reopen. And so I really want to compliment the people that are in the industry on making sure we don't be a part of the problem. One of the things that was stated was having our board be a dominant figure in making decisions rather than the individual counties and the health department. I couldn't agree more with that. I was horrified when I was told that I could, thank you, I could be outside cutting hair. That was a slap in the face, albeit I understand it was hopefully to help us to be able to open again. But then the fires hit, that thunderstorm that came through was insane, and there was no safety in that. And so the safety of being outside and carrying equipment and paying for certifications to be able to do that, I would really like to know more about how our state board of cosmetology can be more in charge. And
This is the moderator. The 2 minutes has, we've reached 2 minutes, so I went ahead and muted the individual. And it looks like we do not have any other requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
All right. Q&A feature is now closed.
Okay, thank you to everyone who provided public comment at today's meeting. At this time, I would like to take suggestions for future agenda items from my fellow board members. Derek, I see that your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. I have a suggestion for a future agenda item, one in which was hopefully we can discuss about mobile booking applications. I know that during this time, we were kind of given the directive to start, if you haven't already, to do online booking and use that service for clients. The one issue that I have with that is that the online booking has no way of having any kind of license verification. So I think that especially during a time like this, it's so accessible and easy for anybody to use an online booking system. It kind of puts the public at risk as well. And it clouds the difference between people like ourselves who are trained and licensed as opposed to those that are not. So I would definitely like to see if we can put that on the agenda item for next meeting so we can discuss the mobile booking apps and license verifications.
Thank you, Derek. Any other suggestions from board members for future agenda items? I'm not seeing any hands raised. For myself, I think based on some of the comments from Andrew Drabkin today, I would be interested in seeing our legislative committee convened or added as an agenda item so that we can discuss a legislative agenda for next year.
This is the moderator. Can I interrupt real quick? It sounds like we're having some technical issues. Let's see. I'm going to try something. All right. Marcine and Christy, are you still hearing members of the audience on the line talking?
So I'm getting messages from staff regarding audio quality. I'm not sure if it's just our staff. I can hear board members as well as the moderator without a problem.
I'm hearing and seeing everything well on my end.
Thank you.
This is the moderator. Sounds like it might be an issue on the staff side.
We'll pause for staff to get back online.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your patience. We're just waiting for our staff to get back on the call.
Hi, this is Christy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear you as well.
Okay, great. And did you catch Derek's suggestion for a board meeting agenda item?
I did not.
Okay, so just to recap, that Derek has asked that on the next board meeting agenda, we add mobile applications. And I see that Derek's hand is up. Derek, did you want to repeat?
Yeah, I apologize. I left my hand up, but I'll be happy to repeat. The issue of mobile booking apps, I just want to see if we can add that to the agenda item to discuss licensing verification, excuse me, with the use of mobile apps. Currently, we've been directed to use mobile apps for online booking during this time. I see the issue of not being able to distinguish who's licensed and who's not licensed, leaving the public at risk as they assume that people using those mobile apps are all licensed. So I think that's an item that we should discuss at the next meeting if possible. Thank you.
This is Christy. I got that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Andrew, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I was just going to basically second what you were suggesting, Lisa, about having the legislation committee meet prior to the next board meeting and give us a report out. And if I am on the legislation committee, can we meet in November post the election so I can actually attend?
Thank you, Andrew. And so, Christy, I had suggested earlier that we have the legislation committee convene either before the meeting, the next board meeting, or at the next board meeting so that we can set a legislative agenda for the board for the next year.
That sounds great. And I will look at the members of that committee and contact you on a date.
Okay, great. Okay, any other suggestions for agenda items? I don't see any other hands raised. And those were the only suggestions that were made. Christy, just FYI.
Great, thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, so with that, it looks like we have no further comments from board members regarding agenda item number 10. And so we can actually adjourn the meeting. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 11:16 a.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you, board.